Welcome to the Copeland Coaching Podcast, where it's all about turning your job search into a slam dunk. Your host is Angela Copeland.
Welcome to the Copeland Coaching Podcast. I'm your host, Angela Copeland. On the phone with me today, I have AJ Vollmoeller in Philadelphia. AJ is the president of Future Force Staffing and the author of How to Not Get Hired. AJ, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you so much, Angela. I'm glad to be here.
Well, things today are pretty nuts, but so is the job market.
Yeah, there's nothing normal anymore. And that's kind of the theme of 2020, I feel.
I know. I almost feel like we're all just ready for 2021. But
yeah, I mean, it's a leap year, but I'd really like to leap this whole year,
Oh, you're right.
Agreed.
Instead
of just one day in February, I wish we could just leap the whole year.
Agreed. Well, since we're in the middle of it, let's talk about this COVID thing. You have been posting on social media about job searching during COVID. I mean, it's such an important issue. Given that you're out there in the middle of the staffing world, what are you seeing in terms of the job market? Is it really as bad as it looks?
My opinion from the surface, what everybody's saying with these very high unemployment rates, it's not as bad as it sounds. A lot of these people that have quote unquote lost their jobs are going to be called back as soon as their jobs reopen or their state or their city is allowed for them to go back into their respective fields and start working again. So I believe once jobs open back up, and companies open back up, that a lot of people are going to be called back, and that percentage rate is going to drop of unemployment. But there's still going to be a lot of companies out there who realized this was the perfect time to trim the fat. This is, we can do this exact same thing with less employees. So I don't think it's as bad as it seems, but I do think it's still going to be relatively bad.
Yeah, that makes sense. Do you think there are certain industries or certain types of jobs that are being impacted more than other types of jobs?
It's hard to say. A lot of my clients, their client-facing roles have come to a stop. But all companies, no matter what industry you are in, you still have the same basic back office operations. Finance, accounting, all that. So a lot of the companies still have to employ those people, still have to hire, to keep their business running. From what people see on the surface, the back office still has to run.
I think you're right. And, you mentioned sort of earlier, it sounds like companies may realize that they can be more efficient, like as they're kind of letting people go, so to speak, right now. They may or may not recall every single person. So I think really starting to look at jobs now is a smart idea.
It is. It can never hurt to keep your options open. Whenever I talk to candidates, I never ask them if they're looking for a new job, because it's very easy to say, no, I'm happy where I am. But it's almost very closed-minded not to keep your options open. You may have an option for advancement. This may provide a better opportunity for you. Most people just won't see it because rather than looking to see what doors open, they're staring at the door that was closed in their face. So this is an opportunity for people that may have been stuck in a job where they haven't seen advancement in 4, 5, 6, 7 years. It's a time to switch and take that next step in your career. So a lot of people, I feel that this gave them the out that they needed, whether they realized that they needed it or not, to help advance themselves in their career.
That's really true. Well, so say we start job searching and we're looking around on LinkedIn or Glassdoor or wherever, and we see a job posted that we're interested in. How should we change our approach due to COVID, or should we at all?
The approach to job finding and initial interviewing is all still the same. There's really no difference. Definitely, you can either apply online, depending on the size of the company. Sometimes it does list the poster, whoever posted the job. I would say reach out to them directly. It can never hurt. Just even if they say no, you still have to apply in through the website or through the LinkedIn post. At least now they know your name. You put your name in front of them. So it can never hurt to go a little bit different angles, but that's applicable in any situation, not just these current times we're in. You always want to try to set yourself apart or get recognized.
Mm-hmm. When it comes to setting yourself apart, like what sorts of things do you see candidates do? Like what's an example of something somebody's done that really impressed you when you were looking for candidates?
Um, I like to say I've seen it all, but then as soon as I say that, the very next day, I'm like, wow, I can't believe now I've seen it all. I say that all the time. I've seen everything from, you have what I call, resumes and interviewing. There's trends, just like fashion. One of the trends a few years ago was to do anything you can to get recognized. And that's when people would, send in a box with their resume inside of a dress shoe, just one dress shoe in it. And, there's a note that said, now that I've got my foot in the door. I don't think we're in the times that you have to go to that extreme. Although if you want, that's your personality, it can't hurt. But it's really just setting yourself apart. And nowadays, the common misperception is that you need to be extremely well versed and just straight lined on an interview. And the fact of the matter is, most companies these days, and definitely recruiters, we're also interviewing your personality, not just your skill sets on
Mhm.
paper. We have two very, very different types of cultures in the nation today in business. And that's what I call old school and new school. And obviously there's ones that cross over, but the old school is the more suit and tie. You walk in, you sit down, you do your job. It's a pretty straight laced environment. And then you have the Googles and the Facebooks and the Apples with their campuses with ball pits and game rooms and things like that. And not everybody is able to be effective in each culture. If you take somebody who's worked 20 years in finance in a very straight laced type of culture and throw them into Apple, where you've got people running around on razor scooters and and ball pits and free food and all this stuff, they may be overwhelmed. And vice versa. You take
Mhm.
somebody out, they're not going to feel comfortable. They're going to feel sheltered and trapped. So it's very much show your personality is what I'm getting at. The best way to get the job is to be yourself. Don't try to hold back. Just really, if go with your gut. If you want to pick up that phone and you think, hey, this is the way I'm going to get into the job, make that phone call rather than applying in, do it. Just go with what you feel.
I think you're right. One thing you mentioned there with regards to sort of personality versus skills, I think very often a company will overlook if you don't have all the skills required because many times they can't find somebody that has every single skill on their list, but they will pass you up if you don't fit personality wise. So I think you're right. And it's important to keep in mind, especially in the case where maybe we don't meet every single job requirement, but personality wise, and culturally we are a good fit. I think, that's where you have to keep applying and putting yourself out there, even when you don't meet all the requirements.
I agree wholeheartedly. It's just really putting yourself out there. General rule of thumb for me as a recruiter, and what I've been taught throughout my career, is the 80% rule. If their skill sets are an 80% match or better of the job description, they have a shot. More than likely, you're never going to find a 100% match. That's the whole reason job descriptions are written. They're written a little bit heftier than they should be to make sure that even if you have to sacrifice a little bit and go down to an 80 or 90% match, it's still fulfilling the company's needs. So people focus like, oh, I don't have the the eighth bullet point that's out of 10 on a job description. That's okay. You have your personality. That's the other 15 or 20% that you may need to help you get the job.
Mhm. 100%. And it's interesting. I sometimes, when I'm talking with job seekers, I'll say, let's think about how this job description got drafted. The boss was in a rush. They'd been kind of like doing double duty for a while. And maybe they went online and like copied and pasted a job description from somewhere else. Or maybe a couple of departments all put their 2 cents in. I mean, who knows how that job description got put together? And who knows if the company is even looking for every single one of those things? I mean, you really you can't sort of second guess it, and also it's how do you fit as compared to other people. So anyhow, you mentioned earlier about applying online, and I think as we talk about that, usually we're talking about applying online directly for a company, so you'd be working with an internal recruiter versus you're more of like an external recruiter, where you're helping companies go out and search out candidates. And I'm curious, in your role, do you have the opportunity to sort of form relationships with candidates over time where you're able to kind of get to know them so that when a like when an opportunity comes up at a company, you've kind of got like a Rolodex, so to speak, of all these potential candidates. Like, is that something that you try to do?
Me personally, because when I started Future Force, I did it a little bit different than
Hmm.
other staffing agencies out there. That is the norm, exactly how you explained it,
Okay.
is keeping a bench of candidates or backup or, simplified terms, a database of candidates. This way you can be proactive for your clients rather than reactive. Uh, with Future Force, I take the reactive approach because I am a poacher or a headhunter. My clients come to me after the fact, after the other staffing agencies that they work with haven't been able to fill a role, have a very niche skill set, or or role that requires a little bit more of a finesse approach than you would get from the standard staffing agencies nowadays that have 40 or 50 recruiters sitting in, entry level sitting in cubicles.
Hmm.
So I don't really uh, put the job seekers that I come across with into a separate database because all of my clients, when they come to me, their needs are normally one off. Rarely, if ever, will I have the same need for two different clients or the same need at all ever in my career. And if I do, it's definitely not going to be in the same state or in the same area. So I don't need that database. But as for building the relationships, that's the whole reason I do staffing. This is why I started my own company. This is why I transitioned from outside sales into staffing, is because I love building that relationship with the direct hire permanent candidates. You build these relationships. People are appreciative. You've helped them change their lives for the better, whether it be financially or giving them more work-life balance, whatever the case may be. They're thankful for you. And clients become candidates. Candidates become clients. I've helped some people get a job, 3 years ago, and now they've taken a promotion. They're in a hiring manager
Hmm.
role. They're coming back to me because they remember the relationship I built with them and how well we work together to help them staff. So they become clients. And now clients that I've worked with for years, sometimes that hiring manager is ready to advance their career outside the current company. They'll come to me. Can you help me out? So clients become candidates. It's building relationships. I've noticed that I've tapped into resources that I've forged, 5, 6, 7 years ago and haven't talked to people in 3 or 4 years. But when you reach out to them, they're receptive because you made that good impression. You built that relationship with them. So building relationships is the whole reason that I do staffing.
That makes a lot of sense. When you reach out to people, so say you're on the hunt for somebody that has a particular skill set, when you reach out to them, do you ever? I occasionally hear this from external recruiters. They will use the line, they'll say to the person, the candidate, they'll say, do you know anyone who would be interested in this role? Like, do you ever use that particular line when you reach out to people?
No, because everybody can read between the lines and know exactly what you're doing. Maybe when that saying was first introduced, it was a good saying to kind of pull the wool over people's eyes to be like, no, I don't know anybody, but maybe I'm interested. It's better to be direct rather than beat around the bush. Everybody knows that line. They know what you're looking for. I normally close with, if a candidate tells me they're not interested, then I'll ask them if they know anybody that would be a good fit. But by that time, they're already, if they know that they're not interested or it's not a good fit for them, they're already referring people to me. I have a friend, I'm letting them
Hmm.
tell me rather than asking them directly for them.
That's smart. I asked this question because I have run into job seekers before who actually don't know what this question means.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And
Okay.
and they will
It
say to the
is.
recruiter like, "Oh, well, let me think about it." And I'll say, "They're asking you if you're interested."
Yeah. And that's the thing. I mean, some people don't, some people have been in their current positions for 10, 15, 20 years. It's leaving every 3 to 3.5 years is a relatively new trend.
Mhm.
So a lot of people, you're right, probably have no idea, but that's exactly what they're asking. And it just goes to show even more, you shouldn't beat around the bush. Just ask the
Yeah.
person the direct question you want. So this way you're avoiding any confusion.
Right. Well, so for the job interviews that you're seeing that are happening during COVID, what is kind of the same as before in terms of the process and what's different? I mean, are we still doing in-person interviews or is it all on Zoom? Like what's happening?
So a few weeks ago when COVID happened, my industry, my company came to a screeching halt overnight. Everybody stopped interviewing, stopped hiring. Companies were scrambling internally to figure out how to transition to everybody work from home. The interview process was the last on their mind. They were just trying to stay afloat at that time. And now, from after keeping in contact with my clients, and also now that they've started to pick back up and start interview again, I've realized that the interviewing was never the issue. It was the onboarding. Most companies do not know how to onboard virtually. They
Mm-hmm.
don't have a plan. They've never done it before. Um, so that's where it came into. They knew they could get through the process with interviewing because they're still relatively the same. In-person interviews can transition to Skype or Zoom. But then once they say, yes, we want to hire you, and they put the offer letter out and it's accepted, they have no idea what the next step is because they can't bring them into HR anymore. So a
Mm-hmm.
lot of companies had to set up virtual onboarding. And you know just as well as I do, Angela, that's not something you can just figure out overnight. Depending on the size of the company, it can take weeks, if not months, to implement an effective system.
It's interesting that you point that out. Yeah, I have actually seen a couple of folks get hired recently and to be onboarded remotely. But I think, we had all been on this self-isolation thing for at least a month before it happened. So I think it's a tricky process for companies, but they're starting to learn to manage along with the remote work that everyone's doing.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be a learning process and a learning curve. And since I just started recruiting again, I don't have any candidates that are in that final interview or ready to be hired with any of my clients yet. So I can't speak directly what's changed now, but from keeping in contact and understanding my clients' needs, and it's kind of talking to them throughout this process, kind of getting a gauge of where they're at, it's really come down to that onboarding, and that's what they all needed to figure out.
Mm-hmm. Well, so you're going through it with everybody else.
Yeah, I am. I'm trying to understand because this time it's changing interview processes.
Mm-hmm.
People are thinking, or companies are thinking that they're going to need to change. So I need to stay on top of that, because when I'm telling my candidates what the interview process is going to be and pitching timelines to them, because I do provide what I call a white glove type of service to my clients and candidates. And for my candidates, I walk them through everything. I prepare them for every interview. I don't let them go in blind. They know what to expect. So now I'm telling my candidates that this is the way that their interview process used to be, or the hiring process used to be, and they should be staying to this. But there's probably going to be some variation, but I have no idea what it's going to be. So I just have to set the expectations now that the unexpected is the expectation of the interview process during these times, why companies are figuring out their kinks and just smoothing out their process again.
Right? It's a little like snow in the middle of May.
Yeah, exactly. That's a perfect analogy.
Yeah. Well, so I'm kind of excited about the idea that perhaps maybe more jobs become remote. Have you yet noticed a trend one way or the other if companies are starting to post jobs that where you can work from anywhere? Or do you think companies are still kind of sticking to their traditional, you need to be in this city model?
That's a tricky question. I believe a lot of companies and industries that have been resistant to advancing into more of a modern type culture are going to be forced to do it nowadays, just simply because they've been resistant for so long. They're so far disconnected that they at least have to update a little bit and learn to have remote employees. One of the industries that I've noticed is always one of the last to really catch up is finance.
Mm,
It's just a very straight-laced industry. They've been doing the same thing for as long as they've been doing it. Their culture stays inside their own four walls within their office or within their company. I worked for a finance company for a short time, internal recruiting for them, and that's when I was really starting to pay attention to that. And the advancements, they're resistant to them, certain industries, but now they're going to be forced to actually adapt or adopt them and advance into more of a modern type of culture. Now, I don't know if they're going to go completely remote or if companies are exploring it. I believe the longer that we're stuck on quarantine, I know here in Philly, they just extended it until June 4th. It's going to be the longer amount of time companies have to figure this out. So the quicker we can get back to work, I think the quicker things are going to go back to what companies consider their normal pre-COVID. The longer we wait, the more time it gives them to figure out a new normal and implement it into the company.
I think you're right. And what's interesting? I'm starting to hear conversations at companies where even after their local area reopens, they are planning to continue to be remote and work from home for a few months, um, just to keep the workers safe, first of all, but also because of this time of year, a lot of people who have kids, for example, they've got to watch their kids at home, until the daycares reopen and the summer camps reopen. Those employees really can't go back to work. And so you make some really good points, but I think it'll be a while before things get back to normal. With that said, there
I
also
don't think we're ever going back to what the old normal was. I think there's going to
yeah,
be a sense of normality, but we're definitely going to have a new normal coming out of this.
I think you're right. And I think it will vary some by region of the country. I mean, I have friends in Tennessee and in Texas and Oklahoma where their life has already gone back to normal, you
Yeah, I
know?
have friends in Florida that they're out in the boat, they're out getting drinks, and meanwhile I'm stuck in a high rise.
Right.
Here in Philly.
That's right. That's right. Well, I'm just really curious to see what happens. But so say we make our way into a job interview, which seems so tricky right now, but I'll tell you, I am still seeing jobs posted online. So say we make it into an interview. One of the questions almost always that comes up in every interview is, why are you looking for a job? And especially if we're in a situation where, say, we've been laid off due to COVID or we're concerned about layoffs due to COVID. I mean, how would you answer that question? And does it look like a black mark on us if we've been laid off? How can we overcome this issue?
The thing is being laid off is never a black mark. If it's a habit within, if you're telling a recruiter or potential new employer that your past 4 jobs you've been laid off from, then it's a red flag. But especially during this time, saying you've been laid off is not at all a black mark, as long as you present it like that. If you present it that you're scared to say it, it's going to come off that you may have been laid off for a reason other than COVID or other than just what's going on in the world today. And that may prompt more questions. But you should always be honest. The one thing that is an extreme turnoff for recruiters and hiring managers alike is if you've been laid off, or when they ask you what happened, why you're no longer with your old company or why you're looking for a new position, it's okay to be honest, but don't bash. If you didn't get along with your manager, don't say, well, me and my manager and I didn't see eye to eye, so I had to leave. That's a little bit too far over the edge. You're probably going to shoot yourself in the foot. But if you say, dude, there was some internal, how can I word this? Let me think here. If there was just lighten it up a little bit and don't bash the manager. Don't ever bash the company. You can say that it just wasn't right for you. You felt that, there wasn't advancement opportunities for you, whatever the case may be. Always make it a little bit soft, and one thing that I've learned, a lot of people, if they're nervous about presenting this question when asked, their answers tend to be extremely in-depth. They can go on and on and on because they're trying to explain it, not only to the interviewer, they're also making sure that they're explaining it correct. So they're listening to themselves, and they just keep getting deeper and deeper and deeper, going down that rabbit hole. It's perfectly okay. Why are you looking for a new job? I was laid off from my old company. It was not a performance issue. It's just some things happened internally, and I'm looking for that next step in my life or next step in my career. You just say that, you passed it off, you brush it off, and it's not a big deal. But if you go into depth, the more you explain, the more we're thinking you're lying.
Right. I think you're right. I almost think of it like a PR thing, right? If you give an answer that is too brief, they're going to dig for more information. If you give too much information, there's a happy medium where you give just enough so they don't have any follow-up questions, but not too much. And I would say, if you're nervous about this question, write down your answer, not for the purpose of memorizing an answer, but think through ahead of time what you would want to say, knowing that this question may come up, and practice saying it a few times, until it feels a little more natural, so that you're prepared and you can give an honest, comfortable answer when the time comes.
I agree.
Well, so on your social media, something that caught my eye is, and I was really impressed, is that you've been offering to review resumes during the time of COVID at a reduced rate. And I'd love to learn more about sort of what made you decide to do that and how it's going.
Well, it's going great. And really, as I mentioned earlier, overnight, my business stopped. I came to a screeching halt. I had no more interviews. The people that I had that were already in the process of interviewing were put on pause. Nobody was hiring. And as a business owner and entrepreneur, it's a very unsettling feeling. But at the same time, you have to do anything you possibly can. You have to refocus. You have to do whatever you can to keep busy and make sure that you're staying afloat. And that's exactly what happened to me. I really had to redirect, and I realized that the market changed overnight, and it's no longer where there's more job openings than there are people unemployed. So
Mm-hmm.
now, rather than having to cater to my clients because their needs were the bigger ones, now it's the candidates that have the need. There's people finding themselves on the open job market, and they've been in their job for 18 or 19 years. They're 1 year away from retirement, or they've been with the company since the start, and whatever the case may be, they have no idea how to look for jobs or what resumes should look like nowadays. So I needed to refocus, and I also want to help. That's the whole reason I do recruiting and staffing to begin with, is that it's a feel good position because I help people out. So the best way to do it was help people with resumes, with interviewing skills. A lot of people that are on the job market now have no idea about LinkedIn or that you can find jobs there. They're still thumbing through the pages of their newspaper to the help wanted section is the last time they looked for a job. So I figured I could do my part, but at the same time, these people are unemployed. I didn't feel right charging them to get a new job
Mm-hmm.
because they're struggling. So it's a balance where I have to make sure that I'm able to keep myself afloat because I am providing a service. But at the same time, I don't want these people to feel like they're going into debt just to find a new job. So it's a healthy balance. And that's why I started to do the reduced rate. I didn't just throw a number out there. I realized on average how long it takes me to do a resume. I know what my average hourly consultant rate is. And I just kind of broke it down from there and was able to give a reduced rate. And people really jumped on it. I was not expecting to be inundated the way I was with, within a day or two of 40, 50, 60 resumes in my inbox waiting to get done. And now that I've been looking at the resumes, I've been seeing a lot of them are very outdated. They're meaning that they're not easy to read. They're in paragraph form rather than bullet point form. They just don't flow. They don't tell the story immediately of your background. And that will get your resume put off to the side because a reviewer is not going to take the time to try to search for the answers they're looking for in your resume to see if you are a fit when they have 60 other resumes waiting. They're going to pass yours off. They're going to go to the next one. And if the relevant information jumps off the page at them, it's going to grab them. They're going to look into it. If it doesn't, they're going to pass it off and move to the next one. So it's about getting the relevant information in that person's face.
No, you're right. I know everyone really appreciates you offering this service. I think they say you get about 7 seconds for someone to look at your resume. And
6 to 8 seconds. Yeah. Average
right.
that 7.
Yeah.
So, and that's what it is. I mean, I've seen thousands of resumes, more than likely tens of thousands of resumes throughout my career. And you scan them and you look
Mhm.
for the dates of employment to see if they have tenure at a company or if they skipped around or whatever that may be. And you look for titles and, locate or names of companies if they've been with big companies, small companies, things like that. And then if you don't immediately see that, you pass it off because you don't want to have to search. But if you see that, then you'll look deeper into the resume. Then you're giving an additional 20 seconds or 30 seconds. Then you're pulling up their LinkedIn and, then all of a sudden you're on the phone with them or reaching out for an interview.
Absolutely. Well, I'm not sure that you'll have time to continue to review resumes, but we'll have links to your social media so people can at least
It's
check.
something that I love doing it. It's fun to me. I love the same reason I like doing laundry and the dishes. It's crazy, but I love things that you see immediate results. You take a resume that I know would get passed off, and then I work some magic on it, update it, kind of redo the format. And then I look at them side by side, and it's satisfying to me knowing that I was able to help this person. Same thing with dishes and laundry. You put them in dirty, they come out clean. It's the same concept.
Well, speaking of seeing results, I mentioned at the beginning of the show that you're the author of How to Not Get Hired. And I know it's a coffee table book that shares a lot of the crazy things that you've seen as a recruiter and kind of summarizing for us what we should not be doing. What are a few of the things that we should definitely not be doing if we want to get a new job?
You should definitely not be putting your GPA on your resume. If you have more than 3 years of experience in your respected industry, it's great for entry level because that's all they have to go off of. They don't have the experience to speak on their resume, so you have to go off of a GPA. Now, if you've had 5, 8, 10, 15 years in your industry or more, there's no reason to have your GPA on your resume. And the reason for that is when it comes down to the final two candidates, if it's you and someone else, you guys both have this, or they both have the same skill set. The company's really bouncing back and forth. One hiring manager wants one candidate, the other hiring manager wants the other candidate. You're looking for things to separate them. If they both have their GPAs listed and one has a 3.2 and one has a 3.4, we're going to use that as the differentiating factor because we're looking for something that makes one better than the other. If one has a 3.4 and the other one doesn't have it listed, we're not going to use that as a differentiating factor. So listing your GPA can either hurt you or do absolutely nothing for you. It's never really going to help you. So I tell everybody, it's one of my pet peeves. Take your GPA off your resume if you've got more than 3 years in the industry. And also the 3/4 page at the top of skill sets and summary. And we know the summary paragraph are all the same. It's people talking about themselves. I do this, I'm motivated. So keep that short, or you can take it right off. Experience should be front and center on your resume. Your resume is telling the story of your career history, of your job history. You get to tell the story of your in-depth skill sets and things like that once you get on the phone.
Excellent. I like your point about the GPA. I've never heard it described in quite that way, but I completely agree with you.
Yeah, I've read quite a few articles and had quite a few conversations at networking events and with my peers about it. I mean, it's all the same thing. If you're coming out of college, it's a great thing to have because it's the only thing we can base, your background on. But if you're well into your career, let your career speak, not your GPA. Unless you have a 4.0. If you have a 4.0 or better, then you can list it. It's probably still not going to help you, but if you want to brag about it because you got a 4.0 in college 10 years ago, be my guest. Anything less than that, just leave it off.
Right. I think my other pet peeve on the resume is when people use like really old email addresses or sort of email addresses that are not necessarily resume appropriate.
There's an entire section in my book dedicated to exactly this.
Oh, really? Excellent.
Baby mama 458. It's unbelievable the email addresses that I've seen. And I've actually, in fixing up resumes, even when it was just kind of something I was doing for friends before I actually incorporated it into Future Force, into career service division, I was having to tell my friends that, create an email address that is simple. First name dot last name. First initial, last initial, something like that, something that's professional. Because if it's the same email address you made when you were 16 or 21, more than likely it's more fun and professional.
Totally agree. And again, it's that you don't want that 7 seconds of time to be taken up by somebody thinking about your weird email address.
Yeah, well, once you see the weird email address, you're just going to pass off the resume. You're not going to give it any more seconds. And normally the email address is in the header. So now you just drop down to 1 second of review,
100%. Well, so where can we go to learn more about you, your work, and your book?
So the book is www.howtonotgethired.com. It's a compilation of funny resumes I've seen throughout the years. I've collected them for probably about 7 years now. And funny interview stories, people that have come in and urinated themselves out of nerves, things like that. Urinating Eugene is one of the more prominent stories that people talk about. But it's funny interview stories, funny resumes. It shows you what not to do, which in turn teaches you what to do with a comedic shtick to it. So it's really great. It's great for entry level, mid level, recent grads that are just getting into the job market. Anybody that hasn't been in the job market for a while and just really wants to learn some tips and tricks for interviewing and for resume writing, it's definitely going to be a help. My LinkedIn is linkedin.com/recruiter AJ Vollmoeller. And then my social media handle is Instagram is @AJ_Vollmoeller. And then my direct email address is AJ@futureforcetalent.com.
Well, excellent. We'll share all of this.
Yeah, sorry. I was like going through them in my head. I was like, did I touch on all of them?
You got it. We'll share it on the show notes and we'll put it in the podcast information online. And AJ, thank you for joining me. It's been great to chat with you. And thank you for giving us advice on how to manage our job search through COVID.
Thank you so much for having me, Angela. Have a great day.
Thank you for listening. If you've enjoyed the episode today, please don't forget to help me out. Go to Apple Podcasts and subscribe to the show. The more subscribers we have, the easier it is for other people to find the show. The Copeland Coaching Podcast is hosted by me, Angela Copeland. The show is edited by Daniel Lynn. Our media manager is Jennifer Strafacci. You can find more episodes of the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you for listening. I'll see you soon.